Good evening. I'm Nima and this is Forum Daily for Thursday, June 23rd. And we start the cast with a look at the Pope's upcoming tour of reconciliation in Canada. The Vatican has announced Pope Francis will start his trip in Edmonton on July 24th. He'll visit the site of the Ermineskin Indian Residential School in Alberta, and he will meet with survivors, go to an Indigenous church in downtown Edmonton, and celebrate Mass at Commonwealth Stadium. The Pope will travel to Quebec City for meetings with the Prime Minister and Governor General and celebrate Mass before as many as 15,000 people at Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré. He will wrap up his trip in Iqaluit. Meanwhile, in Rwanda, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attended a roundtable discussion with the country's president. The meeting comes on the sidelines of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali. He and Paul Kagame, who is hosting the summit, talked about the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and their plans to reinvigorate the global economy. A planned one-on-one meeting between Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Kagame has been delayed until later this week. The PM hopes to use that discussion to win support for an unlikely Commonwealth consensus on the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. All right, turning to an emergency committee meeting held by the World Health Organization. The meeting will decide if the outbreak of monkeypox in countries around the world warrants being declared a global emergency. That declaration would mean the UN Health Agency considers the outbreak to be an extraordinary event and that the disease is at the risk of spreading across even more borders. Many scientists doubt it would help to curb the epidemic. The WHO said on Thursday that it did not expect to announce any decisions by its emergency committee before Friday. Back at home, MPs will begin heading out on the summer barbecue circuit today as a tumultuous spring sitting comes to an end. The last session could be remembered for three things: polarized politics, another conservative leadership race, and the NDP Liberal Confidence and Supply Agreement. A new survey finds almost half of Canadians who rent will continue to do so indefinitely, and they aren't sure when they'll be able to get into the housing market. Renters surveyed by insurance firm Canada Life cited a lack of cash, fear, and uncertainty as reasons for staying on the sidelines. This with almost 73% saying it's a bad time to buy a house and 17% saying they'll never buy one. 79% of respondents believe home ownership is a good investment. However, 64% don't think they'll be able to buy a house until they have financial support from others, like family members. The survey also finds Canadians between 25 and 29 are 2 times more likely to continue renting indefinitely compared to those aged 30 to 49. Meanwhile, a report from the Federal Housing Agency says Canada would need to add 22 million housing units by 2030. This to ensure housing affordability for everyone in the country. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says that will require developers to become more productive and make full use of land holdings. This while governments will need to accelerate regulatory systems. CMHC says the biggest declines in affordability are in BC and Ontario, where 2/3 of the housing supply gap is found. It says average households in the two provinces needed to devote nearly 60% of their income to buy an average home last year. This is up from 40% in Ontario in 2003 and 2004 and 45% in BC. Now, if we take a look at Canada's manufacturing industry, it seems companies aren't satisfied with the federal government's efforts in addressing emissions. A new survey by the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters finds most think the federal government isn't doing enough to help the industry transition to net zero emissions and remain competitive. Manufacturers want more federal support, including investments and partnership, to help businesses of all sizes in the transition to net zero. CME says a successful strategy involves supporting emission reduction investments and the commercialization and production of clean technologies. All right, moving to a more pressing issue. Around the world, there are thousands of merfolk. These include people of all shapes, genders, and backgrounds who enjoy dressing up as mermaids. They also attend conventions and competitions and pour their savings into a multi-million-dollar mermaid tail industry. Marielle Henolt's Montreal home is stuffed to the gills with mermaid tails. The Aqua Mermaid CEO sells them all over the world, and her company runs mermaiding schools across Canada and the United States. All right, we'll be right back after the break with a look at blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. We're going to speak with Brendan Caldwell from Caldwell Securities Limited. We'll be back really shortly. See you soon. As the crypto world continues to expand, so does blockchain technology. Cryptocurrency exchange DYDX has announced the launch of a standalone blockchain, this in hopes of decentralizing the platform. The new Layer 1 blockchain will become home to the DYDX token. Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank of India has announced a blockchain-based pilot project called Proof of Concept, which will center around trade financing. And on Tuesday, blockchain-based payments company Rox Holdings announced it has entered into a definitive agreement with Goldstone Acquisition Limited to become a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. Well, joining us now to talk more about blockchain is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Nima.
So for those unfamiliar, what exactly is blockchain, Brendan?
Well, it is a way of keeping track of data, information in a group or a block that are all linked together. Hence, the name is actually very descriptive, blockchain. The difference, whereas previously this entity or this company or this database would hold on to it, this is what they call a distributed ledger. This is broadly held and accessible, keeping track of these bits of information, this record, this block, in a way that is decentralized, so not held by one entity, but available or accessible across a broader range of users.
And how important is blockchain to the world of cryptocurrencies, Brendan?
Well, it's actually critical because it is in solving the algorithm that puts the block together that the cryptos are created. Original one being Bitcoin, Ethereum, these ones, they're all created by the creation of these blocks and solving the algorithm that creates them. So the cryptocurrencies are actually a product of the blockchain. The cryptos are dependent on the blockchain, not necessarily the other way around, though. So it is the powering mechanism, and people have been buying and selling the cryptocurrencies, so-called, and there's obviously got a lot of press there, but the underlying technology, the way that information is stored in a decentralized way, I think that actually has the bigger, more interesting long-term implications for how record keeping is done and how financial systems and other ways of keeping track of things are actually maintained.
And we know you play a very strong role in blockchain in Canada. You're on the board of Canadian Securities Exchange, and I've read that they're in the process of being the first to use blockchain technology. So what will the benefits be for listed companies and investors?
Very specifically, lots of people use blockchain technology, but in the securities business, it's kind of a strange thing where most things happen instantaneously in the world at large. But in the securities business, if you buy or sell a stock, you have a record date, and then 2 days later, or 2 business days later, I should say, the trade actually settles. So if you were to buy or sell something, a stock, Bell Canada, or whatever else, on a Thursday, that trade would only settle. The payment would actually only get made on the Monday. And if it's a long weekend, then not till the Tuesday. So for then 2 or 3 or 4 and 5 days later, this trade is still outstanding, and financial institutions need to have the capital available to potentially settle that trade. And as Shakespeare wrote, "'Tis many a slip twixt the cup and the lip," and stuff can go wrong. Whereas using blockchain technology, which is the CSE's looking to start to do quite presently, Canadian Securities Exchange is looking to do, will allow potentially the securities records to be kept more or less real time. Initially, it's not going to be about trading. It'll be more the reorganization functions, dividends, stock options, warrants, royalties. But the ability to buy or sell and have something like instantaneous settlement will not only free up a lot of capital, but also free up a lot of man hours that are spent making these things settle 2 or 3 or 5 days later.
All right, Brendan, we've got a quick 30 seconds left here, but what are you watching for as this industry continues to expand and grow?
I think I'm looking for the rebound. So we've been through this a few times where new technologies, even in my lifetime, we have personal computers, the internet, and now this blockchain distributed ledger technology, where there was a big bunch of noise about it, but then people didn't know how to use it. Personal computers you could keep recipes on, and we didn't know what it would be used for.
Welcome back. Up now, we'll take a look at the markets with Catherine Murray. Catherine is the host of The Buck Stops Here, and she joins us now. All yours, Catherine.
Thanks, Nima. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly market recap. I'm Catherine Murray. Well, we are seeing markets trading in mixed territory today, and we have continued to see a lot of swings once again. That is a narrative that is not changing anytime soon. But we have seen a little bit of stability or stabilization within the markets, really driven by a reprieve in yields, the interest rate environment that is, with the U.S. 10-year yield down by 40 basis points. That has certainly been helping some of the higher valuation stocks, such as tech stocks, as well as the growth areas of the market, which of course have been under such significant pressure as we've seen rates rise within the yield market or the bond market, and also of course on the back of the U.S. Federal Reserve raising rates, and also of course the BOC. That's put a lot of downward pressure on those higher multiple stocks. We're also, of course, seeing WTI, the price of oil, which has pulled back. That's actually been supportive for sentiment in the broader markets, easing some of those input fears or input costs, I should say. WTI, in fact, is down by about 16% since its recent high on June the 14th. So that is, again, alleviating some of those inflation input cost fears that investors have, and of course, corporations do as well. Another bullish case for the market: oversold conditions. I mean, we have seen these markets trade down 20, 30%, depending on the stock or sector that you're looking at. So again, perhaps there's a little bit of buying opportunity. As well, some of the recent economic data has actually disappointed. It's almost bad news is good news. And why I say that is because if the economy is in fact slowing down, perhaps the U.S. Federal Reserve will not have to be as tight or as aggressive in its tightening mode. So in other words, perhaps what they've already been doing is working. And perhaps as well, we were already starting to see some of the demand destruction. So again, all of those are acting as tailwinds for the broader market. Now, of course, still many investors are very concerned about rising input costs. We know that food inflation is still very much present. And even though WTI is down, it is still at very elevated levels versus what we've all been experiencing over the past number of years. So the fear, of course, is that will put pressure on corporate profits. And therefore, there is an expectation from some investors, the bearish investors, that we will see downward earnings revisions. And then, of course, you have to apply whatever market multiple you believe we will see on those corporate profits or downward earnings revisions. So that is the bearish case for the market. And also, we're concerned, or investors are concerned, that the U.S. Federal Reserve will in fact induce a recession. Now, we have had one U.S. quarter of negative GDP. We'll see what the next one brings. 2 quarters, of course, equals a recession by definition. Some, in fact, say we are already in that camp. Now, away from the macro picture, important to take a look at a few stocks to watch and sectors as well. We are seeing U.S. oil stocks, banks, materials, and airlines all lagging. But interestingly, you're seeing home builders, technology, big box retailers are among some of the best performers. Again, the technology stocks, of course, were really hit by the higher rate environment. With a bit of a reprieve, you do see those stocks start to outperform a little bit, which is what we're seeing today. 2 stocks to watch: Snowflake in the SaaS environment, software as a service, that is. That's up by about 8%. It was actually up by 10% earlier today. That is following an upgrade over at JP Morgan to an overweight position, setting strong results in their recent CIO survey. So in other words, chief investment officers that are looking for a software as a service company, apparently like Snowflake. We're also, of course, keeping our eyes on KB Home. KBH is the ticker there in the home builder sector. They had a nice second quarter beat driven by higher prices and also better margins, helping that stock up significantly today. And the TSX, meanwhile, is trading down by about 1.5 to 1.7%, close to the lows of the day. I am taping this at about 2 o'clock. Energy, materials, and financials are lagging the broader market. The Canadian dollar is lower versus the US dollar. And interestingly, as we look at the inflation data out this week, that of course was the big news, Canadian CPI for May rose 7.7%. That was higher versus expectations and the highest reading since 1983. The next meeting is July the 13th. Expectations are for a 75 basis point hike. But interestingly, JP Morgan is out saying that that perhaps we could see the BOC raise by 100 basis points. So a lot to watch for. There's no doubt about that. And of course, global slowdown fears also weighing on the broader market as more central bankers around the world continue to raise rates. Again, we'll see what the BOC does on July 13th. Nima, I'll leave it there. Back to you.
Lots to watch indeed, Catherine. Thanks for that. For more on the markets, be sure to follow Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops Here. Up next, we're going to take a look at news happening around the world. So stay tuned. Forum Daily will be right back after a short break. Rescuers in Afghanistan are using their hands and whatever tools they have to try to find survivors buried in the rubble of homes after a 6.1 magnitude earthquake. This comes as men dug a line of graves in one village, trying to lay the dead to rest quickly in the Muslim tradition. Yesterday's quake killed at least 1,000 people, injured about 1,500 others, and has left many more people without food or a roof over their heads. All right, turning to EU efforts to aid war-torn Ukraine. European Union leaders have agreed to grant Ukraine candidate status to join the 27-nation bloc. It is the first step in a long and unpredictable journey toward full membership that could take years to achieve. The decision to grant Ukraine candidate status on Thursday was uncharacteristically rapid. This comes after leaders were initially divided on how fast they could move to embrace the bid, which was launched only a few days after Russia began its attack on February 24th. China's implicit support of Russia's war in Ukraine could be observed at a virtual meeting of leaders of major developing countries. This was where President Xi Jinping opened the meeting by saying the world should oppose unilateral sanctions and efforts by some countries to maintain their political and military power. Mr. Xi's remarks at the meeting of the leaders of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, known collectively as BRICS, reflect China's tacit backing of the war, as well as its desire to form an international alliance opposed to the U.S.-led liberal democratic order. The BRICS meeting comes amid rising concerns over the global economic outlook and a growing political divide between China and India. All right, switching gears here to a recent study on COVID-19 vaccines published in the Lancet Infectious Diseases Journal. Researchers estimate COVID vaccines prevented 19.8 million out of a potential 31.4 million deaths worldwide in their first year of use. The report says researchers applied a mathematical model of COVID transmission and vaccination to fit data on COVID-19 mortalities in 185 countries. Critics point out the numbers are only estimates and may vary considerably from real-life data. This is for many reasons, such as inaccurate reporting of vaccine administration and COVID deaths from each country. In the U.S., a Florida judge has signed off on a more than $1 billion settlement for victims of the collapse of a beachfront condominium building, which killed 98 people, including 4 Canadians. Tomorrow will be the first anniversary of the Chaplin Towers South disaster in the Miami suburb of Surfside. The bulk of the money will go to people who lost family members. About $100 million is earmarked for legal fees, and $96 million will go to condo owners who lost one of the 136 units in the building. Moving to a disturbing case in the UK, where London's Metropolitan Police have charged 2 Nigerians with conspiring to bring a child to the country in order to harvest organs. Police took a child to safety after they were alerted to potential modern slavery offenses in May. The suspects are a 60-year-old man and a 55-year-old woman, and they share the names and ages of a former deputy president of the Nigerian Senate and his wife. Meanwhile, millions of people in the United Kingdom are facing disruptions as railway staff stage their second national walkout of the week. The 24-hour walkout by 40,000 cleaners, signalers, maintenance workers, and station staff canceled about 4/5 of passenger services across the country on Thursday. A third strike is planned for Saturday. The dispute centers on pay, working conditions, and job security. In Japan, Okinawa is marking the 77th anniversary of the end of one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War. The Battle of Okinawa killed about 200,000 people. Nearly half of them were Okinawan residents. Governor Denny Tamaki is calling for further reduction of the U.S. military presence there. This comes amid growing fear that the southern Japanese islands will become embroiled in regional military tension. He adds that Okinawa still faces burdens related to American troops, including noise, pollution, accidents, and crime. Japanese architect Shigeru Ban has won the Concord Prize from Spain's Princess of Asturias Awards. This for his pioneering work on designing temporary shelters for people affected by natural disasters and armed conflict. The jury says the shelters offer dignity to those needing emergency help. Mr. Ban's use of cardboard tubes for construction was first used for Rwandan refugees in the 1990s. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.